What's going on, guys? Welcome back into the channel. Today we are going to be continuing our play calling series here on the channel, and today we're going to be discussing essentially how to prevent the defense from easily defending your plays whenever you're calling plays on offense. Essentially how to avoid being predictable and how to avoid calling plays that are just simply easy to defend for the defense. And today we're going to just jump into some of the different formations and things that you are going to want to avoid on the offensive side of the ball, and we're just going to jump into it. This may not be a long video, but a couple of important tips for you guys whenever you're calling plays on the offensive side of the ball. Now, the first thing that I want to tell you guys on the offensive side of the ball is it's extremely important to prevent essentially giving away the information of what your offensive play is going to do, or essentially, to break that down a little bit further, it is imperative that you guys prevent calling plays that don't have a lot of option from the offensive perspective. So let's say we look at this wing slot offset gun formation here that the Pittsburgh Steelers have, and as you guys can see, there's a 57% go-to percentage in this playbook, which is pretty bad for a formation that I'm going to tell you guys is going to be a disadvantage for you. Number one, you're going to want to have your best personnel on the field at all times, and you're going to want to have your best personnel in positions to make the defense think that you can pass the ball to them. So let's say that I come out in this formation. There is not a lot that I can do out of this offensive formation. As you guys can see, it is a lopsided formation where I only have two wide receivers on the left side of the ball, two tight ends off the right side of the line of scrimmage, and a halfback coming out of the backfield. This is a formation that I would deem to be a very ineffective formation, and a formation that is very easy for a defense to defend because it's very clear what you're trying to do with this formation. As a halfback, you can only run to the left side of the ball. Sure, you can probably cut back to the right, but generally speaking, you're going to be going left or straight, so it's very clear what the run play is going to be doing. And then once you get to the passing side of things, there's only so much that these receivers can do. You're not going to obviously have two wide receivers target the same part of the field over there on the left side, so one of them is very likely going to be going upfield, and the other one is going to be breaking out to target the outside part of the field. Otherwise, you can probably go into a double slant formation where these guys are coming across the middle. There's not a lot that the offensive personnel can do out of this type of a formation. Sure, coming out in this type of an offense, you can audible these players to do different things. You can hot route them and whatnot, but there's simply not a lot you can do out of a formation like this, and from a defensive perspective, it's pretty easy to tell what's going to happen here. Number two, to talk about this formation, I have two tight ends, which is very often a suboptimal type of passing attack. Whenever you're coming out in the shotgun, for example, you generally don't want to have two tight ends on the field out of the shotgun unless you're trying to run, unless you've faked them out with, you've ran consistently out of this formation, then all of a sudden you want to hit them with a pass out of it. That's okay, but if you're consistently calling formations like this where you're at a disadvantage offensively, then you're going to create problems for your offense. And let's go ahead and check some of the other plays that, or some of the other formations that could potentially put you at a disadvantage because they make it easy for the defense to tell what you're doing. So first things first, let's take a look at a good offensive formation that's going to make it more difficult for the defense to tell what you're doing. So as you guys can see, the first two formations here are bad formations in my opinion because there's not a lot that you can do out of the wing slot offset or the wing slot weak. However, if you were to compare the wing slot weak to the wing slot offset, you could at least in this formation run to the right side of the ball, which is the strong side where the tight ends are. Compare that, though, to a formation very simply like the doubles halfback weak. There's not a lot of difference here between these formations, but the personnel is more to your advantage. So when you look at the gun doubles halfback weak, you at least have those two wide receivers on the left side still, but you have a wide receiver threat far out to the right side, which number one spreads out the defense, and number two opens up the options for what you can do in the passing game. As well, that second tight end is unnecessary to run block out of that shotgun formation. I would much prefer to come out in a doubles halfback weak because, like I said, that spreads out the defense, and I do still have that tight end on the edge that can help block for me, and I get a ton of yardage out of the doubles halfback weak here. So what I run quite often is the inside zone out of the gun doubles halfback weak, and this is a fantastic running play because you have that tight end to the strong side of the formation, but on top of that, you also have many passing threats out of this formation and many different looks that you can give the defense. This is the type of formation that you want to run on the offensive side of the ball because it's hard to be predictable. This is a formation that I can easily run out of, and I can also easily do a bunch of different things in the passing game out of. That is very hard to defend from a defensive perspective, whereas if you're coming out in a wing slot weak or a wing slot offset, it's a little bit more predictable. It's a little bit easier to figure out exactly what the offense is going to be doing from a defensive perspective. So from a shotgun perspective, it is always pretty much to your advantage to have more players out that can do more things for you, and it's very often to your advantage to not bunch players up on one side of the field. Now, there are occasions where a formation like the trio here can be used to your advantage. One of the best plays in the game is the PA deep cross because it's kind of a glitch play. It almost always gets a play open. It's a cheese play. There are situations where that can help you out, but for the most part, running a formation like this prevents you from having options on the offensive side of the ball, because whenever I'm selecting a pass play out of a formation like this, most of what's happening is going on one side of the field, as opposed to things being spread out on both sides of the field, the defense having to react to two sides of the field. It condenses things and creates easy defense for the defensive side of the play calling. It essentially says, okay, well, from a defensive perspective, I can stack my defense towards the left side. I don't have to worry about a lot on the right side of the football. And you'll see in a lot of these plays, very often the only player going to the right side of the football is actually the halfback going out on a wheel. So if you can cover that, you're fine. So running a formation like this is very often to your disadvantage. It is very often to your advantage to run something where you have players on both sides of the ball. Spread Y slot weak is a good formation. And then a lot of the spread formations like the empty bunch and the empty tray stack, these are all really good formations because there's so much you can do out of a formation like this. There are so many different route combinations and ways to run off defenders and create open spots in the defense that these formations are simply better for you. So if you're accidentally, or you're not aware of the fact that you're picking formations like this that can be to your disadvantage, that could be a major problem for you. Another one that I like to point out is the weak formation. The weak formation is very generally a bad formation in my personal opinion in Madden, and a lot of people still run the weak formation. And why do I say that it's a bad formation? Well, you're really hamstrung in terms of what you can actually do out of this formation. As you guys can see with the passing plays, there just simply aren't very many there. They're not very good. But what I will also say is that in order to run out of this formation, you're going to be following your fullback on the weak side of the formation, which is generally speaking a bad thing to do from an offensive perspective. When you're in the weak formation, it is very predictable to see what the offense is going to be doing. From a defensive perspective, I know that they're going to be running to the weak side, or it will be a slow developing counterplay to the right side of the field. In addition to that, I know that there are very few passing options out of a formation like that. Instead, I would suggest from an offensive perspective that you either run the strong formation, or more importantly, you simply run the I-form tight or the I-form wing or one of the I formations that are out there, because this is a much more effective way to target a defense and prevent them from knowing exactly what you're going to do. So this is a more balanced formation, and very often you can have the I formations and even the single back formations that have two wide receivers, one on each side of the ball, which is going to help you guys out, spread the defense out and keep them guessing. But from the I formation, it's easier to tell, it's easier to go either direction. You can do a halfback toss to the right, or you can do a halfback lead dive to the left. You can flip the plays and you'll never tell a difference of what's going on with the offense. You know, if I call a halfback lead dive, for example, you'll never tell which way I'm running the ball. I can have it to the left, or I can simply flip the play and have it run to the right, and they'll never be able to tell exactly what I'm doing out of this formation. Now, this is another formation where it's not great to pass out of it, but it does have a lot of options in terms of play action. This is a good formation to run play action out of if you've established a run, so this is a good formation for you guys to utilize. The play action here oftentimes works very well. So I overthrew the tight end there, but he was open, and there are a lot of good options out of the I formations. That's one of the formations that I highly recommend you guys take a look at and utilize more so than the strong or the weak formations, because those ones are a little bit more predictable in terms of what you're actually doing, and it's a little bit easier from the defensive perspective to say, okay, well, this guy's coming out in a weak formation. He's either going to be doing a dive to the left, which is the weak side, which is easy to defend in the first place, or he's going to be doing a slow developing counter play to the right, which again is pretty easy to predict. Or maybe that fullback comes in motion and he does another very easily predictable play to the right side. And that brings me to another point, is that there are a lot of running plays, for example, like this halfback power O. You should avoid doing these ones, in my opinion, that have motion, because they make it very easy for the defense, again, to tell what you're doing. So whenever this fullback goes in motion, it makes it so obvious that I'm running the ball to the right side that the defense, especially a user, should always adjust to it and always be able to read what you're doing and easily stop that before it gets going anywhere. Personally speaking, I try to avoid running any running plays that have motion like that, because the direction of the motion is very often the direction of the running play. Now, there are some good playbooks and good plays where you can fake motion and go the other way, or do play action and various different things that are going to get the defense off balance, but in my personal opinion, this is a waste of a play. And in order to utilize a motion play and then use that to set up a play action play, my personal opinion is that's a waste of time in Madden. In real life, that works. In Madden, it doesn't work quite the same. You're wasting your time by utilizing a play like this, because it's making it easy for the defense to predict what you're doing. And let's say, for example, that I do this, well, there's two options. I'm either running to that side or I'm doing a play action to that side. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. So again, get in the habit of not calling these plays that are easy for the defense to read and easy for them to predict exactly what you're going to be doing. So those motion plays, very easy to predict what you're doing, very easy to stop. Likewise, with the single back formation, try to avoid some of the formations that are like wing tight and things like that, unless you have a really good play that you particularly like out of some of those. The wing pair is one that is a really good formation that would seem to be a bit unbalanced, but there is a lot of there are a lot of good plays that you can run passing and running out of the wing pair. Generally speaking, though, I prefer to go with a single back formation like the single back ace, or maybe even the single back bunch, because these are plays where it's a little bit more difficult for the defense to tell what you're doing. Whenever you come out in a single back bunch, it's real easy to run a counter, to run a inside zone split, and likewise you can run a lot of good passing plays out of these formations and keep the defense guessing. So personally speaking, my biggest tip for you guys from the offensive side of the ball to prevent the defense from easily telling what you're doing, my biggest tip for you guys is to select plays that give yourselves options. Select plays that aren't going to telegraph to the defense what you're going to be doing. So when you're on the defensive, think about when you're on the defensive side of the ball and some of the things that you see on offense that are like, oh, well, I know what this guy's doing because he came out in this formation, or I can tell pretty easily what this guy's going to be doing because he is kind of limited on where he has players spaced out on the field. He's only got guys on the left side, so I primarily only need to defend the left side of the field. Think about it from a defensive perspective whenever you're offensively play calling and say, is this easy from a defensive perspective to tell what's going on? Likewise, one of the other things that I want to kind of talk to you about is personnel and getting your best personnel into the game. If you're constantly calling formations that don't utilize your best personnel, then it makes it kind of easy for the defense to game plan. So let's say we go back to this gun wing slot offset again. My best players are my receivers. So it's kind of obvious that I'm going to be throwing to those players. When let's say I have two kind of subpar tight ends on the other side, my first options aren't obviously going to be those tight ends, and I'm going to try to avoid throwing to those tight ends. And so again, it makes it kind of obvious what I'm doing on offense. Whereas if I go to a spread formation, I have 4 wide receivers out there and my halfback spread out. It's hard for them to say or pinpoint, oh, this is where they're going to be going on the offensive side of the ball. And the last point that I want to leave you guys with is keeping the defense guessing in terms of what you guys are doing. So, don't simply run dives all game long. Don't simply run power run plays all game long. Try to mix in some of those counter run plays and things that can get big gains for you once you've got the defense kind of guessing which way you're gonna go. If let's say that you've constantly all game long with the I form run the halfback power O with major success, well then maybe you guys should think about running a toss to the opposite side or a halfback counter. Just throw it in there to keep the defense off balance. If you're constantly utilizing the same plays over and over again, you're going to become predictable, and it's going to be easy for the defense to tell what you're going to be doing. So you could call all the good formations in the world, but if you're using the same play over and over again, you become easier to defend. Likewise, you need to be able to have a balanced offense where you have the threat of running and the threat of passing. So that goes back to the formations thing. Make sure that you're calling formations where you always at least have the threat of running the ball and passing the ball. So when you're running a gun empty, you have to realize that you don't have the threat of running the football, so especially if you don't have a scrambling quarterback. So it's easy for the defense to say, okay, I'm just going to sit back in coverage, drop everybody into coverage, and prevent them from throwing the ball downfield. I'm going to get an interception, tip ball, knocked out ball, whatever it is. It's easy to defend a formation like this sometimes because if you're running it all game long, all the defense has to do is drop back into coverage. So if that's the case where you're having problems like that, then come out in a double halfback week where you at least have the halfback on the field, or come out in a formation like the gun bunch, or come out in the spread Y slot week, because at least you have that halfback back there that gives you the option of running the football and keeping the defense honest if they're going to go with a majorly pass heavy defense where you'll have major run gaps and you'll be able to attack those. So again, make sure that you guys are not calling plays that are easy for the defense to read. Don't call formations that are easy for the defense to figure out, hey, this is the direction that they're going. Make sure that you guys are keeping the defense off balance with your play calling, and make sure that you guys at least have the threat of both passing and running on most of your plays, because that is what is one of the major tips that's going to prevent defenses from easily picking out what you're going to be doing. That's probably one of the biggest ones is at least have the threat to both pass and run the football and be legitimate about it, because if you come out in formations like this all game but you never actually run the football, then you don't have the threat of running the football. I don't have to defend it if you come out in this formation and you never run the football. So at least keep the defense honest in that regard. So hopefully this information helps you guys out in some way. Like I said, I didn't think this would be a super long video, but a couple of tips that should help prevent you guys from easily being read by the defense and people easily telling what you're doing on the offensive side of the ball. If it does help you guys out in some way, or this maybe gets your brain churning a little bit on how to adjust your play calling to better keep the defense honest and keep them guessing, make sure you guys drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Comment down below with anything you guys would like to see next, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Hope you guys have a good night.